UFC 302. These are the updated full card predictions and the betting breakdown. I'm looking forward to talking about each of the matchups on this card. So make sure you all smash the likes. If you're new, subscribe to the channel. Turn the post notifications on and make sure you share the video as well. And also note, I'm going to be live for the entire UFC 302 fight card. Fight Companion going down at 6 p.m. Eastern time on Saturday. You don't want to miss it. Let's get into these updated predictions. Starting the card off, we have a new fight. It's André Lima versus Mitch Raposo. Raposo is coming in replacing Tumendambari, who was honestly pretty hype, and I was really excited for that fight. Unfortunately, visa issues, he pulled out. Respect to Raposo jumping in. I'm picking André Lima. I'm going to tell you out the gate. I'm going with him. I cannot go with Mitch Raposo, even though I like his skill set. And going back and rewatching a couple of his recent fights, he's comfortable in both stances. He has pretty good straight shots, specifically with his right hand. He has some solid takedowns, and he is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. The issue lies upon, over the past 2 years, since his loss on Contender Series, which was about 2.5 years ago, into Jake Hadley. Yes, he's on a 4-fight winning streak, but let's look at the opposition, right? He fought a 3-2 fighter and won by submission. He fought this guy, Flavio Carvalho, who was 7-4. Dude looked 45 years old and had really horrible stand-up. Now, he viciously knocked him out in the second round, which was impressive, and he handled it as he should have. But again, not the high-tier opposition, right? A 2-0 fighter. And then last time out, Justin Valentine got destroyed for pretty much every round up until the 4th round stoppage where Raposo was able to get him out of there. But truth is, Raposo hasn't beaten anybody to Lima's level, and Lima is consistently just fighting better guys. Contender Series against Contender Series against Zendijim, who was 14-1. And then in the battle of Contender Series winners, Igor Severino, I mean, granted, you could say, oh, he was getting taken down a little bit in that fight. There was great striking exchanges, big shots landing, and Severino really did no damage from top position, and he wasn't really able to control, Lima much at all in that fight. So I think Lima's Muay Thai striking is a massive factor in this fight. I do think Mitch Raposo has potential option of landing takedowns, but I do not think it's going to be easy to keep André Lima down. André Lima has good get-ups. He's very explosive. He scrambles well. There's a lot of things to like in his defensive grappling capabilities. And I can't go out here and pick a short notice Mitch Raposo to win when he's definitely at a disadvantage in striking, and his path to victory would be grappling heavy, pressure control, top position, landing the takedowns, working against the cage. Another factor that's major is we are not at the UFC Apex. We are at the big cage. For a striker with the movement, footwork, and striking skill of André Lima, the big cage is way better. He's got way more of a chance of effective offense landing. So I am feeling like André Lima should pull this one out. Now, Mitch Raposo, tough dude. I think Lima could definitely hurt him with some big shots and even cut him open. I think we can go the distance. I think Lima by decision. I respect Raposo overall, and I think the dude has a lot of heart. He's tough, and the loss he had to Jake Hadley was a submission loss. Granted, he landed takedowns in the first round. The second round, Hadley ended up taking over. I think Lima and him go the full, but I think Lima pulls it off pretty cleanly with just superior striking and grappling defense in the fight. So I am going to go with André Lima to win. I'll be honest, I wanted to pick Mitch Raposo just because I remember him from Ultimate Fighter. I was rooting for him. He's a Massachusetts guy. There's a lot of things to like. And I think that he has an exciting future with the UFC. I believe he'll stick around. But Lima's just a little bit too crisp, and I think a tricky matchup, especially on short notice. A week's notice, 2 weeks' notice, not enough time. Odds for the fight, minus 218 for André Lima with Mitch Raposo at plus 188. I think these odds are pretty fair. Lima's 1-0 in the UFC. He looked decent against Severino. I mean, the striking was definitely looking nice. Severino was kind of, pressing him a lot with the grappling. But it was at the Apex, a smaller cage, which, gives more of an option for that grappling heavy pressure approach, where it's the big cage with these flyweights. I think Lima's going to have a lot of room to move and strike, and I expect him to be successful. So Lima to win the first fight of the night. Next fight on the card, we have Jocelyn Edwards versus Ailin Perez. Nothing has changed in me with the official prediction in this fight. I am still going with Ailin Perez because Jocelyn Edwards is not going to be able to consistently stop takedowns. And the sole way she's going to have to really win this fight is relying on Perez gassing herself out with dominance in the early rounds and then absolutely bombing on her in round number 3. But Jocelyn Edwards isn't much of a power striker or finisher. She has clean kickboxing for sure, but she's going to be on her back for a significant portion of time. I talked about this in the early predictions. If you look, Ailin Perez versus Lucy Pudilova and Jocelyn Edwards versus Lucy Pudilova. Now, I'm not saying use MMA math to make your picks, but Jocelyn Edwards was bodied by Pudilova and won a very controversial decision. For the first 2 rounds, Ailin Perez was absolutely dominant in the grappling, and then she was losing that 3rd round pretty cleanly. So like I said, we're going to be reliant on Perez gassing out. I don't think so. I think Perez is going to be pretty on point with wrestling, and I think she wins a decision and grinds out Jocelyn Edwards in their rematch. I know they didn't fight in the cage, but they got into a street fight before Ailin Perez's last fight. She's a minus 195 favorite. Jocelyn Edwards, the plus 170 dog. Pretty good chance we're going over 2.5, and the bookies completely agree with a minus 400 tag for that over. So give me Ailin Perez. I think she controls in the grappling, and I think she's beaten Jocelyn Edwards. Next fight, we have Mickey Gall versus Bassil Hafez. I got faith that Bassil Hafez is not going to fumble the bag in this fight. He's got to win. I think Bassil Hafez can body Mickey Gall in the grappling. If you remember some fights ago, like even Mike Perry was having success taking Mickey Gall down. Mickey Gall was ground and pound stopped by Diego Sanchez some years ago. He's on a 2-fight losing streak. He hasn't fought all the way since 2022, and it was a loss to Mike Malott on the feet too. And then, he ended up making his way back, and they're giving him Bassil Hafez, who last time out went to a split decision with Jack Della Maddalena, who's like top 6 in the welterweight division right now. Hafez should probably dominate this fight. The issue I have is Hafez, though he's a physical specimen, I'm not 100% confident in his stopping power with the hands. He's not necessarily a knockout artist, even though he has this big menacing frame. He's very physically strong. He's good on the inside. He can make fights dirty. I think Bassil Hafez could put Mickey Gall on his back and beat him up. I think there's a chance for a late ground and pound stoppage here. I think I got to stick, with the side of Mickey Gall. I got to stick with the side of Bassil Hafez winning this thing by ground and pound TKO. I think that's probably what's going to end up happening. But if it went the full distance, it wouldn't blow my mind simply because Hafez is not a knockout artist. And I think it's going to be difficult to submit Mickey Gall here. So I'm going to go Bassil Hafez to win this thing. As far as, saying it's definitely a knockout, I don't love it. I don't love the confidence. I don't love the prop. Hafez down the line is minus 275, and over 1.5 is minus 200. I think an over 1.5 is pretty likely in this spot. Bassil Hafez, I don't see him going out there and just blitzing Mickey Gall in 30 seconds, though Hafez has one of those jacked frames like a Jeremiah Wells. I don't think he has that same type of knockout power in his hands. So I'm going to pick Bassil Hafez to get it done on the cards. I think he should beat Mickey Gall. I see him winning the fight. I think that he controls on the ground. I think he controls against the cage. I do think he can land some big strikes on the feet. Mickey Gall, I don't think has the power to keep him off either. So I think if, Jack Della Maddalena, you're going to split decision with, I think you should be dominating and eventually finishing Mickey Gall. So I am going to say Hafez does get the knockout win. I'm going to pick a finish for him in this fight here. And I'll say he stops Gall, but I'm not necessarily all over saying, that prop is the lock of the century. No, it's a pick. And I think Bassil Hafez is a sure winner here against Mickey. Next fight, we have rematch Niko Price versus Alex Morono. Their last fight was years back. I think it was 2017 when they last fought. And Alex Morono had an awesome first round. He dropped Niko Price. He landed some great shots. He dropped him twice, actually. And then he got flatlined at the end of the second round with a huge right hand on the temple, and he was out cold against the cage. And the fight was in Texas, in his home state. I think he's going to right the wrong, though. I think he turns up this time against Niko Price. Price has not looked good in some time. If you look, his recent win is over 2.5 years ago against Alex Oliveira, who was released from the UFC, and I think towards the teetering end of his fighting career. Whereas Morono's actually looked pretty good. I know he's traded wins and losses in his last 4, but a loss to Ponzinibbio in a fight he was winning, he got caught late. He got caught late against Niko Price. A win over Tim Means by submission, which was pretty impressive at the time. Loses to Buckley, who's a top contender at this point in the top 10, top 11. And then a Court McGee win. And honestly, it wasn't that impressive against Court McGee because he ended up on his back getting beat up a little bit against Court. But I don't think Niko Price and him match up anywhere like the Court McGee fight. It's going to be primarily striking because Niko Price, for the most part, is a striker. He's also on a 2-fight knockout losing streak. Phil Rowe knocked him out, and Robbie Lawler knocked him out very quick. I think Alex Morono can also knock out Niko Price. I'm going to say that he avenges the loss here, and he ends up getting a knockout win. I see that fight playing out towards Morono. I think the looping shots work for him here. Niko Price maybe a little chinny at this point. I don't know where his motivation lies. Hasn't looked good in some time. And I just think Niko Price is a little too sloppy on the feet. Morono should find some clean shots and put him out of there. Alex Morono's a minus 220 favorite here with Niko Price as a plus 185 dog. Over 1.5 is minus 190, but it is expected to end inside distance. The under 2.5 is minus 130. I'm going to say we are going under that 2.5 mark, and I think Morono wins. What's interesting is when I did the early predictions for the fight, it was, minus 270, teetering towards the minus 300 range with Morono as a much wider favorite, right? But now the line is minus 220. It becomes, at the very least, more parlayable. And as much as people want to say, I'm not sure with Morono, you can't be sure with Niko Price either. I think people that will be on the Niko Price betting side is more so for the value of, it's plus money, as opposed to he's looked good recently. No. Even Morono's loss against Ponzinibbio, in all actuality, there was positive takeaways. Same with his Buckley loss. And the masses are on Alex Morono. I am going to say knockout, though. I think you can find the Niko Price chin and put him out. I'm going Morono by KO here. I feel pretty good about this pick. Next fight on the card, we have Phil Rowe versus Jake Matthews. I really like Phil Rowe as an underdog. I'm picking him. I'm sticking with the underdog. There's no sway of confidence, and what's crazy is the line is actually spread nicely since I initially picked Phil Rowe. I think he was at plus 115. Now he's upwards of plus 140. Phil Rowe has a massive reach advantage and a distance striking edge. Rowe is pretty good with his boxing, and his recent loss to Neil Magny was actually a really good performance that could have gone either way. So I do think this is a substantial step down in competition for Rowe. Rowe, in a sense, has similarities to Magny with his clinch abilities, and I don't really see Jake Matthews having the option to take him down and beat him up. And if you're in striking, Phil Rowe with a clean boxing advantage. You look, Jake Matthews' last one, he lost to Michael Morales, who's a pretty good prospect, and he was tough in that fight. Darius Flowers win, but granted, Darius Flowers is levels below of a Phil Rowe, and he was also in that fight on short notice. And then Semmelsberger loss has aged kind of badly here, and André Fialho win is not all that good because Fialho, I think, just recently got knocked out on the regional scene. He's on a 5-fight knockout losing streak. Sean Brady's submission is forgivable. That's 3 years ago. I think Phil Rowe's boxing should come in handy here. He was recently on a 3-fight win streak. Coach Gay, Jason Witt, Niko Price, not huge wins. Niko Price is fighting in the fight right before this. But I think the boxing of Phil Rowe is pretty solid. And I think the boxing is going to carry him to a win. And if they tie up, I think there's a clinch advantage for Phil Rowe. So I'm going with underdog Phil Rowe to get it done. I think he'll get it on the scorecards. Phil Rowe, plus 140, as I said, underdog. Matthews, minus 160. I'm very sure we're going over 1.5 at minus 175. I'm also pretty sure at minus 150, we're going over 2.5. And I like Philly Rowe, Philly Fresh, as an underdog at plus 140. I think he's going to pull through. I feel like the Fresh Prince pulls it out. I think he's got this, man. I really do. I think Phil Rowe pulls it out. I think he touches him up from the outside. I think that Jake Matthews is going to be winging some shots and missing. I'm sure he'll have some moments in the fight, but especially with the big cage, I think this favors the distance striking of the much taller and longer Phil Rowe. And I'm going to pick Phil Rowe to beat Jake Matthews by a decision, and he is an underdog I'm riding with here. Next fight on the card. Grant Dawson versus Joe Solecki. I am going with Grant Dawson to win. I think he can submit Joe Solecki too. Now, it wouldn't be crazy if he goes out and wins a decision, though. It's not like throw your life savings on Grant Dawson to end up locking up a sub. But I think Dawson is clearly the superior wrestler. I think he's better at jiu-jitsu than Joe Solecki. Solecki's biggest strengths normally in his fight are going to be his grappling abilities, and he's at a clear disadvantage here. I'm not enthused by Joe Solecki's stand-up skills. Grant Dawson, to me, I think can at least match the stand-up, but I actually think Grant Dawson's a little more powerful and better in the striking department than Joe Solecki. So if we do see this fight turn into a kickboxing match, I think Grant Dawson's winning it. And then when we go to the ground, I think Grant Dawson has a huge advantage. I think Grant Dawson's going to end up winning by submission. Like, one bad blemish is this Bobby Green fight. He got caught very early and knocked out. It was an excellent shot from Bobby Green. But Grant Dawson, was on fire and was a huge favorite heading into that fight, beating Demiris Magulov, Mark Madsen, Jared Gordon. Jared Gordon and Joe Solecki fought, and Joe Solecki lost to him. Again, not MMA math, but just something to talk about. I think Grant Dawson wins, and I think Grant Dawson could even end up getting a finish over Joe Solecki. Solecki's coming off that bad loss to Jakar Close where he was slammed on his head viciously on a card where we had Brundage getting a slam knockout and Close. That was pretty badass. I think Grant Dawson to win. I'm going to officially call submission. I'm going to say that he thrives in this spot, and this might be the best version of Grant Dawson that we've ever seen before. Minus 330, the favorite for Dawson. It's a tag that's actually quite deserved here because he should be levels above Solecki, who's plus 270. The talk leading into the Bobby Green fight was Grant Dawson was on the verge of becoming a UFC contender. Now we're going to say Joe Solecki's going to be the guy to beat him? No chance. Over 1.5 is minus 200 with an over 2.5 at minus 200. That's weird. So I would just run over to wherever over 1.5 is instead of going for a minus 200 over 2.5 if you like the over spot. Grant Dawson ends up being a wide favorite pick, ultimately more of a parlay piece, but he opened up at minus 450. He's currently minus 330, so the lines come down a bit for him here in a very winnable fight against somebody who I just don't think has a chance against him. So I'm going Grant Dawson. I think he does live up to the hype, at least in this matchup here, and I look forward to more. I think Grant Dawson's pretty good, man. 20-2 as a pro, one draw, the Ricky Glenn draw. But there's a lot of things to like for Dawson, and I think he keeps getting better, and he should be pretty dominant here against Joe. Next fight is our featured prelim of the night. We got Roman Kopylov versus César Almeida. On the early predictions, I picked Roman Kopylov, and I swear to you guys, I've been losing sleep over this fight because I feel so torn. I will say for me, this is like the hardest pick of the night. I have this feeling inside that I just can't describe. I don't think this is the end of the César Almeida run up the ranks. I'm going to pick him. I'm flipping to César Almeida. The early predictions, I was like, okay, Kopylov, he mixes in the takedowns potentially. Maybe he controls. But the more I imagine, I'm like, man, Kopylov doesn't have good top control. He's not known for it. So he lands a takedown, and Almeida bursts up to his feet. Kopylov does nothing, and Almeida lands some decent kicks or strikes or punches or body shots or anything on the feet and wins the round by a tad. Because though Kopylov is a very smooth MMA striker and some of the smoothest striking in the UFC middleweight division, specifically outside of that top 15, he's taking on an elite kickboxer. I have to really take into high regard Almeida's background in pure striking and the stylistic matchup. Though I think Kopylov might be mixing in trips and takedowns, controlling against the cage a bit, it is just not the forte of his game. So now he's going to have to be so adaptive and fighting so outside of his normal realm of how he does things that I think he can fall apart even in the striking where he's best. And I think Almeida is the better striker. Coming from the pro kickboxing base, being 1-2 with Alex Pereira, I know the Budka fight was not that impressive. I know he was able to get a knockout, but he was getting held and hold on and controlled. And like Budka was, in a sense, holding on for dear life. So is Kopylov now going to hold on for dear life? And we're in the bigger cage, so that clinch control and just backing Almeida up seems like a less likely factor. I just feel in my gut that I got to go César Almeida. So I'm pick flipping. From the early predictions, it was Kopylov. I got to go Almeida now. I just don't think the run up the ranks is done with. If he loses to Kopylov at 36, that's it. This is a true make-or-break fight for the 5-0 César Almeida. With a win, you burst into the upper echelon of the UFC middleweight division. With a loss, it's done. Like, sure, he can fight some unranked opposition and be, some type of journeyman gatekeeper for the next 2 to 3 years. But doing anything of actual admiration and respect in your MMA career outside of this fight, no. He needs a win. He needs to beat Roman Kopylov. And I just have this hunch that he's going to. Even though Kopylov has more than double the MMA experience, he's got triple the MMA experience. Almeida has a shit ton of rounds in with professional kickboxing. And I do believe that he wins a hard-fought decision over Kopylov and does some work in the striking department. I'm not confident in Kopylov on the feet, getting kicked at the legs, being against somebody who's better than him in the stand-up. It's just not really a common factor for Kopylov. And a lot of his fights, especially the fights that he's won, and even in his losses, he's substantially slicker in the stand-up than every one of the last 5 opponents, including the guy Hernandez last time, who's a good grappling contender, nasty submissions. Hernandez is no joke. Fluffy's good, but Kopylov was way slicker. Striking-wise, Almeida's going to be better. It just has to be. I got to go with the pro kickboxer. I'm going against the grain. Kopylov is not going to be able to totally adapt this game, turn into a hard-nosed, embrace-the-grind wrestler, and have success here. I'm going Almeida. I think he rips some legs. I think he can land some punches on the feet, too. He could even rock Kopylov, but I'm going to say he ends up getting it done on the judges' scorecards. I'm going César Almeida as a pick flip to beat Kopylov. The odds for this fight, they have Kopylov as a favorite at minus 118. Almeida minus 102, the dog, but you can find him at plus money. Crazy ass fight. Coin flip ass fight. Over 2.5 is plus 100 here. So it's expected to end inside of the distance. I'm going to go with César Almeida. Very nervously picking César Almeida, but I just couldn't stick with the Kopylov pick. I had to flip it. Something inside of me is screaming Almeida for the upset win. So I'm going to pick him. The story doesn't end here. We're going César Almeida to win, and let's keep running up the card. Let's jump to our main card opener. If you guys haven't yet, make sure you smash the like button. If you're new to the channel, subscribe it up. We got Randy Brown versus Elizeu Zaleski. I'm going to say Randy Brown from distance will touch up Zaleski with some clean shots. He might even knock him down. Now, Zaleski's a fucking pit bull. He comes inside. He rips big shots. He's very tough. Now, he was dropped against Rinat Fakhretdinov early in the fight, but he was able to weather the storm, come back, and end up, scoring the fight a damn draw. Ends up surviving and not losing against Fakhretdinov, who was a pretty hyped-up prospect. Randy Brown's coming to his own, though. His only loss out of his past 5 was to Jack Della Maddalena. Zaleski is going to look to bring big pressure and throw power shots, but Randy Brown has a boxing advantage. Brown also has pretty good Brazilian jiu-jitsu. I don't think Zaleski has much of a wrestling option in this fight. I think Randy Brown can pop him with jabs, stay moving, use the big cage. Randy Brown won a competitive decision against absolute knockout artist Chaos Williams recently. And that fight there, even though he was put down a few times, there was a lot of successes with the boxing. And his striking from range should be good. And I don't think it's going to be easy for Zaleski to close a 5-inch reach advantage against the side of Randy Brown, back him up and bully him. I just don't see it, especially when you have a lot of range and ability to move inside of that bigger cage. You got to favor Randy Brown to outbox him. So I'm going with Randy Brown to win. Now the odds for Brown, minus 162. The favorite, Zaleski, plus 142, the underdog. I think Randy Brown wins the decision. Over 2.5 is minus 165. Brown is coming off of a pretty badass knockout win of Muslim Salikov, where he absolutely flattened him. So the counter shot straight hand is definitely there against an aging Zaleski. And it wouldn't be insane if Randy Brown did find the chin and got a knockout. Currently, the Brown knockout is sitting up at plus 300. Something just to note off. Close money fight. Not very wide odds here for Randy Brown, but I got to favor the youth of Brown. And the fact that I really believe he has come into his own over the past couple years. Zaleski at 37, nearly 38, I guess 37 and a half. He's still got some dog left in him. He's got some savage left in him. I mean, you look, the draw there. The win against Abu Bakr was unimpressive. And then Benoit Saint-Denis win has actually aged marvelously because Saint-Denis become a legit top 15 UFC lightweight. I'm going with Randy Brown, though. I think he pulls through. We're going Brown decision win over Elizeu Zaleski in this fight. Next fight on the card, we got heavyweights going after it. We got Jailton Almeida versus Alexander Romanov. I have to ride with the side of Jailton Almeida to finish Romanov. I think he can potentially get a ground and pound stoppage. Now, Romanov has extremely strong wrestling, but a subpar gas tank. And he's a guy where you need to look at his weigh-ins to really know what his motivations lie upon coming into the fight. Because he looked like dog shit against Alexander Volkov on the scale, and he got destroyed in a round. He looked shitty last time in the weigh-ins, and he had a boring win over Blagoy Ivanov. But fights against Chase Sherman, Jared Vandera, he bodies in the grappling. But granted, those guys are cut from the UFC now. So Romanov's wins have not aged that well. Granted, his loss to Marcin Tybura's aged pretty good. He was dominating the first round, but then Tybura turned up on him late in a fight that could have easily been scored a draw. And that's why it was a majority decision, because it was probably a 10-8 first round for Romanov. So could technically be 17-1-1 heading into this fight with Jailton Almeida. But Almeida's jiu-jitsu is strong. Almeida's the better athlete. He's in much better shape than Romanov. And if Romanov is putting his back, I said this with the early predictions, he's going to look like a cow that got tipped over. I don't think he's going to be able to get up. I think Almeida will do work from top position. I'm going to say Almeida works towards a finish. I think Jailton Almeida with ground and pound can pull through in this fight. Now, the odds for Almeida, minus 255 for him with Romanov as a plus 215 dog. I mean, we're probably going over 1.5 at minus 135. Almeida to win by KO, plus 350. Almeida by sub is plus 175. Decisions up at plus 300 too. I mean, it wouldn't be crazy if Almeida ended up winning a decision simply because, Almeida's Derek Lewis fight comes to mind. But I think that Romanov on the ground could gas out, and I think Almeida could end up getting a stoppage win. I'm going to have some faith that Jailton Almeida rights this wrong after the Curtis Blades fight. He was landing takedowns on Blades, or at least pressing him, giving him difficulty in the clinch. I don't think Romanov has a huge wrestling option here. He doesn't have the power of a Curtis Blades. He isn't much of a physical specimen like a Curtis Blades. I think Jailton Almeida finishes Alexander Romanov. And at the very least gets a little bit of the hype back. I don't think he's going to get all the hype back. I think he'll get a little bit of the hype back, but not much. Not too much. Beating Romanov is a must if Jailton Almeida wants to remain afloat in this UFC heavyweight division. And I will predict that he does. I think Romanov is maybe a tad bit overrated in some senses. I guess the hype is dropped here with him now sitting as a big underdog. He came in as this grappling killer, and then the Juan Espino fight, it was underwhelming. I think he could have lost that fight if it didn't go to a technical decision. And then you can see, the loss to Volkov, he looked horrible. The Tybura fight, he was looking good early, but faded later. I don't know. The Blagoy Ivanov fight, he looked really bad. It looked like a battle of two just fat heavyweights. So I think Jailton Almeida should get a finish. Next fight on the card, featured bout. Kevin Holland versus Mikhail Oleksiejczuk. Kevin Holland by submission. Kevin Holland can also strike with Oleksiejczuk and do pretty well. But if they tie up, I think Kevin Holland has a massive advantage in the grappling. Mikhail Oleksiejczuk is, in all actuality, just a suspect grappler. He doesn't have very good jiu-jitsu, and he never has. His game is based upon using boxing. I think that Kevin Holland should fight him with a striking intent early, but a willingness to get this fight to the ground would actually serve Kevin Holland very well because he has a huge advantage in jiu-jitsu. Oleksiejczuk has subpar grappling skills. He got submitted quickly last time out when he took on Michel Pereira, but it's Pereira. Lost to Kyle Barajo early by submission. If you get him to the ground, he's suspect. Now, granted, Barajo's elite jiu-jitsu. Pereira's pretty good with the jits. Kevin Holland, maybe not as well touted in the grappling on paper, but he did end up getting a submission over Michael Chiesa, who's, a pretty notable wrestler / grappler in his own right. And I think in this matchup here, Kevin Holland can get just a tad bit of momentum going for himself once again. He had a very close loss to Jack Della, had a very close loss to Michael Venom Page. These are forgivable L's. I guess the Michael Venom Page fight was a little more clean, than the Jack Della fight, but still competitive in losses. Oleksiejczuk on the other side, he is a middleweight coming down from light heavyweight, but Holland has fought up at light heavyweight, and obviously as of recent, he's been fighting at 170, but I think he can potentially look better here at 185 pounds against, one of the more mid-tier UFC middleweights. I'm going to say Kevin Holland finds a sub. I think he can win. And if it ends up being a striking fight, it wouldn't be crazy if Holland outstruck Oleksiejczuk. Oleksiejczuk's a dangerous southpaw, to be fair. He does have some pop in his hooks, but very short reach, and it's not like we've ever felt like Kevin Holland is a chinny fighter. So I'm going to say Kevin Holland could win this thing. I will call a submission, but I don't know if that would be the lock of the year. You know, you might be better off just money lining it on Holland at minus 260. Oleksiejczuk plus 220. It could go long. Holland by decision is plus 300. And if we go up 3, it's not crazy. Sub is plus 275. The reason I'm not in love with the Kevin Holland sub prop is Kevin Holland's wrestling has never been a strong suit. So if it is to go to the ground, I would assume it would have to be with Holland engaging in the grappling. And I never know how likely that is because a lot of times he falls in love with the striking. But I think he recognizes the boxing threat that Oleksiejczuk has. Kevin Holland, I think, is a more intelligent fighter than people give him credit for. And I think he is going to bring a mixed martial arts attack here. And even if he's not successful with landing takedowns, controlling the clinch, and potentially working towards a front headlock position, as long as Holland's arms are, Darce chokes, anacondas, guillotines are all very live method of victories by submission for him. And I'm going to say he does lock something up. So we're going Kevin Holland to win by submission over Mikhail Oleksiejczuk. Next fight on the card is our co-main event of the evening. Sean Strickland versus Paulo Costa. I'm going against the grain. I think Paulo Costa can shock Sean Strickland and end up surprisingly knocking him out. And I think that people might be underestimating these new UFC gloves. Paulo Costa, they say, isn't a one-shot knockout artist, but he does have a bit of pop. And I don't think anybody would say he doesn't have power, but he's more of a flurrying puncher. Combination strikes, mirages of huge shots, or barrages, rather. I'm going to say that the gloves being 25% smaller is an advantage for the side of Paulo Costa because he is going to land some big shots in this fight. He could rock Sean Strickland, and I think he could potentially stop Sean Strickland with ground and pound. I can see Costa landing one of his power hooks, dropping Sean Strickland and finishing him off. If you look, Sean Strickland has lost by knockout to who? Brazilian strikers. Elizeu Zaleski, who's also on this card, and Alex Pereira, who's elite of elite. I think Paulo Costa can join those three in Brazilians who finished Sean Strickland in the stand-up. I'm going to predict Paulo Costa does win. I think he's not only dangerous with his head strikes, but also with his body kicks. I think he can land some massive shots to the body here that might open up Sean Strickland on the feet and also even things out with the gas tank, because Strickland, obviously known for an extremely good gas tank and his ability to finish fights very strong. If there's some clean body work, that could diminish Sean Strickland. And I do think that will leave openings up top. I think Paulo Costa can shock a lot of people. And we also have another factor that people aren't taking into consideration. This is active Paulo Costa. This is Paulo Costa fighting just 3 months after his most recent fight, where normally he takes years off in between fights. He's been fighting once a year. Now 3 months ago, and he's back. And he looked better than he'd had in a long time against Robert Whittaker. And I know a lot of people are pushing the narrative, oh, it's a washed Robert Whittaker. I'm not so sure that it is. I think that was a very good version of Robert Whittaker. I think that was a Robert Whittaker that knew he had something to prove in the fight. And Paulo Costa had big moments. He rocked Whittaker with the spinning back kick in the first round. And I think Paulo Costa against Sean Strickland can surprise a lot of people. Active Paulo Costa is someone that I have a lot of faith in. We're going Costa for the upset win. Plus 205 for Paulo Costa. Sean Strickland minus 240 the favorite. Let's see. Costa by KO sits up at plus 300. It would just be a money line, though, because plus 300 is not enough points on the increase for, Costa to get it done just by knockout, because Costa has gone 5 rounds, and he looked good late against Marvin Vettori. So I think Paulo Costa can surprise a lot of people. I know he's had some subpar performances in the UFC, but I think that the tide is turning, and an active and motivated Paulo Costa is still one of the most dangerous middleweights on the planet. And I think he's going to earn a lot of fan respect here with Sean Strickland. And truth is, I think Paulo Costa at 33 might be substantially better than he was 3 years ago. I think a consistent, active Paulo Costa could be the best version of himself that we've ever seen. And I think he's taken on an extremely good version of Sean Strickland too, not to take anything away from Strickland. Strickland coming off of the competitive loss to Duplessis, where it could have gone either way in all actuality. Before that, he had the performance of a lifetime against Israel Adesanya. But I think Paulo Costa might have the performance of a lifetime against him here this Saturday. So we're going Costa for the upset win in the co-main event. Next fight on the card, main event of the evening. If you guys haven't yet, make sure you smash the likes. If you're new to the channel, subscribe. Islam Makhachev is going to submit Dustin Poirier in the first 3 rounds. I will predict second or third round. Now, in the striking realm, the kicking skills of Islam Makhachev are a very viable aspect, especially he's got to be riding high with the head kicks after a knockout against Volkanovski, and seeing Poirier viciously knocked out in the second round against Justin Gaethje by high kick. Maybe Makhachev is thinking of catching Poirier as he's slipping to one side or the other. It's a potential method and aspect to lead him to victory, but Islam Makhachev has the clean grappling advantage, 1,000%. We've seen Poirier struggle. Even last time, Benoit Saint-Denis was bodying him. And Islam Makhachev can't do that and then some. I think Makhachev is going to end up finishing Dustin Poirier by rear naked choke. I think he's going to follow Khabib Nurmagomedov. I think he's going to follow Charles Oliveira. And I think he's going to lock up a championship rear naked strangle on Dustin Poirier and retain the title. Islam Makhachev is that guy right now. It's just, that's the truth, man. Now, Makhachev said something interesting about the new gloves. He said they're stiffer and he expects more cuts. And I also believe with the gloves being an ounce smaller than they were previously, so from 4 ounces, those are the old gloves, to 3 ounces, there is a higher potential of knockout wins. So I think for the Dustin Poirier backers, they might be riding with that high confidence, saying that if there's any puncher's chance, it's in this fight right here, especially with the new gloves. But I also think that the smaller gloves are better for chokes, specifically the rear naked choke, because you're going to be able to get behind the head a little bit easier with less padding in the glove. So I'm going to say Islam Makhachev finds the strangle on Dustin Poirier. Of course, Dustin Poirier winning the belt would be an amazing story for the UFC. And even me picking the other side would be more than happy to see Poirier pull it off. But that's just not how the game's going. This is not fairy tale land. This is the UFC. And Dustin Poirier is over 35. We have never seen over 35 win a UFC belt in the lightweight division. On top of that, he's taken on a Dagestani savage. Now, people have spoke upon the Paulo Costa curse. When Costa is on the card, champions lose their belt every time. They're 0-8 on Costa cards. I think Makhachev breaks that streak. Another thing that people have talked about is, Dustin Poirier, in June, he's undefeated. We can go off these fallacies, or we can go off the one reality, the biological truth. Past 35 in the lightweight division, there tends to be a slight slowdown. And I think Islam Makhachev is absolutely the best version of himself that he's ever been. And he's taken on a very game version of Dustin Poirier, but a Poirier that was knocked out 2 fights ago. But a Poirier that 4 fights ago lost to Charles Oliveira. There is a path to victory from Makhachev that I think is the path of least resistance, which is going to be landing takedowns, controlling, grappling, beating on him a little bit, wearing him down, and strangling him. I'm going with Makhachev by sub over Dustin Poirier. Odds for the fight, Makhachev a minus 555 favorite with Dustin Poirier as a plus 405 dog. Damn, the odds are wide. So this is the most real Rocky moment for Dustin Poirier ever. This would be a mass upset. I think that this upset for Poirier over Makhachev is bigger than Strickland's over Israel Adesanya. I think it's even bigger than Juliana Peña's over Amanda Nunes. I think Makhachev's going to win, though. It is what it is. Over 2.5 is plus 135. I mean, I'm seeing a stoppage in the second or third by sub, so I see why that's at plus money. Makhachev by sub is plus 100, so it is slight plus. Just inside distance, Makhachev sits at minus 250, so that's uglier. Big money line, though, minus 555. So minus 250 for an inside distance is way better than the money line. I think this fight's going to end up delivering, though. I think Poirier is going to give a gutsy effort early, and if we are in the striking realm, Poirier's right hook is a terrifying punch that can do the most serious damage, because Makhachev's only loss is a knockout loss with the right hook. So Poirier's best punch is something that Makhachev has been caught by before. But I think Makhachev will be well prepared for that right hook of Poirier. I think he's going to fight this fight with the Dagestan intelligent game plan. Takedown control, beat him up, wear on him, work towards a submission. If Makhachev gets cocky and wants to just kickbox the whole time, of course, Dustin Poirier could land the death punch. But I don't think that's what's going to happen. I think Islam Makhachev is going to submit him. So we're going Makhachev to win the main event and he breaks the Paulo Costa curse, and he reassures us all that that over 35 curse in the lightweight division or below is 100% real. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the updated breakdown for UFC 302. Make sure you all smash the likes, and if you're new, subscribe. Let me know in the comments what you guys think of the picks and drop me some of your favorite picks on the card. And if you guys have any pick flips already, let me know. Weigh-in recap show going down Friday. And hey, who knows? Maybe somebody on the scales will change my mind. But as of right now, these are all the picks that I got locked in. Much love, my people. I hope you appreciate the content. I appreciate you all. Smash the likes on your way out and make sure to subscribe if you're new. And turn those post notifications on because I got daily content coming. And UFC 302 Fight Week is in full swing and I cannot wait for it. Thanks, guys. Peace out.